Mandisibulisele ku-Commander-in-Chief and the President of the Economic Freedom Fighters. Ndibulise kwi-commissars, ndibulise kwi-fighters, ndibulise kwi-EFF structures in Africa, the Africans in the diaspora, people of the world. Igama lam nguNtombuvuyo Veronica Mente, National Chairperson for Economic Freedom Fighters in South Africa. We come here today to deal with the last non-negotiable cardinal pillar. That's pillar number 7. This pillar is about open, accountable, corrupt-free government and society without fear of victimization by state agencies. The EFF in its founding manifesto, when it describes the character, amongst other things, it says, the EFF will be the vanguard of the community and worker struggles and will always be on the side of the people. The EFF will, with determination and consistency, associate with the protest movement in South Africa and will also join in struggles that defy unjust laws. In defying unjust laws and being the vanguard of community struggles, working class, and the protest movement, the EFF therefore becomes an advanced detachment of the society. In society, we therefore assume a role and a responsibility that of conscientizing the society and bring about the advocacy work for the people's rights. Just during the week, last week, after the EFF had launched its online store, a picture of the president of the EFF where he was wearing the regalia of the EFF was taken from the online store, edited the logo, replaced it with that of a petrol station. Another picture before that, when the EFF pronounced itself and aligned its position with that of the taxi industry, that it should be respected and it should be subsidized. There was another picture of the EFF leaders in a taxi depicted as a driver and queue marshals. So these instances where there's a depiction of EFF leaders and displayed as taxi drivers, queue marshals, petrol attendants, has an undertone and a malicious intent in society. An intent that seeks to drive a notion that petrol attendants, taxi drivers, and queue marshals are lesser of people than others. This is done to undermine their industries, to undermine their jobs. Yet, a society that should be living in is a society that's conscious enough to understand that a petrol attendant, a queue marshal, a taxi driver is not lesser of a person than that one who's wearing a suit going to work, than that one who's sitting in an air-conditioned office called the CEO, than that one who's wearing an overall and be a supervisor of the mechanical engineering site. These are the skills that shouldn't be undermined. They are significant in our society. There should be no depiction that seeks to discriminate and build these boundaries and walls amongst ourselves as South Africans. So, as the EFF, we went to Parliament in red overalls. This on its own was a sign of protest. A protest that was highlighting the plight of domestic workers, gardeners, petrol attendants, security guards, mine workers. That me wearing an overall, I'm no lesser of a person than you sitting in Parliament wearing your suit. And our society has to be conscientized and made to understand that the rights of the people are equal. When we go to Parliament and there are always debates, in particular when every president takes the stage in Parliament, they always refer to this country's challenges as triple challenges. That of inequality, that of poverty, that of unemployment. And there is a gap that has to be filled, which the EFF identified. And that gap was a gap of a radical voice that will seek to change the thinking and the mentality in South Africa. The thinking and the mentality that we are always told we're an unequal society should not be embraced. And we should not drive that inequality. That inequality should be something we're all not looking forward to. Now, the key fundamental issue here is that we have to balance that unequal society of the past, make it equal today by any means possible. And that's what the EFF seeks to achieve. Now, the 6 cardinal pillars were dealt with. We'll expropriate the land, nationalize the mines, capacitate the state, get free quality education, health, human settlements, sanitation, water, industrialize, build the massive economic development in Africa. But what kind of a state should be a driving force for the implementation of these cardinal pillars? When all these projects and cardinal pillars are realized, What kind of a state that should be implementing them. So the kind of a state we are looking for is not the kind of a state that we live in today. The kind of a state today is that which is dubbed as a democratic state. And this democratic system, if we were to take the simplest definition of democracy, that of which democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. We look into the state today. Are the people governing? Are the people contributing? Are the people receiving any of the things they have prioritized themselves? Let's take, for example, the budget speech. If you take the budget speech and understand it, parliamentarians are still going to deliberate on it, legislatures, council. But does a person in a remote rural area understand what that budget speech was about? Is there a platform that takes that budget to them for them to understand? Is there a platform that makes them understand why should local government be receiving 10% of a budget nationally, whereas they are at the cold face of the service delivery? There's no such platform. Hence, you will find MECs and ministers launching scooters as ambulances, simply because there are no platforms created to understand the shortcomings and the needs of each society in this country. There is no documented priorities of every village, every township. It's a guessing game. Someone will guess that no, we need water, and we will need a tender to provide this water. Even when that need of water is a correct need, it will be clouded by the process which people are not involved in, where they could have helped in identifying where water could be found easily and simple, and how should it reach them. So the only way that people are utilizing in this current state to hold the government to account is through elections. But is that a process that's just? Because elections, they are not just for all the people to contribute into the societal policies, societal needs. People who then win elections are those that win elections because they have money. The deeper the pocket, the more chances you have to win elections. And that's not what the people are looking for. So the political processes that takes politicians to parliament are very closed and are always driven by how deep pockets of the politicians are. So when the EFF manifesto characterizes this phenomenon, it says the former liberational movement in office will never be a sustainable solution to South Africa's developmental problems in the foreseeable future, owing to its ideological zigzags and the open dominance of neoliberal and right-wing politics. If left unchallenged by a radical left political formation, this will give rise to and attach some sense of political legitimacy to political parties whose agenda and political program is to continue with white supremacy and the imperialist domination of South Africa. Take note of the two words or terms, that there is a continuation of white supremacy in the current state. There is also an imperialist domination in our country. How do we see this? We see it through the policies that gets adopted by government. We've seen it through GIA. We've seen it through ASGISA. We're now seeing it through the NDP. So this system is a capitalist system that has no interest to advance any needs of the poor people and has a complete disregard of the rule of law, because it operates on buying power, and it's a very closed system. Now, how do you tackle a capitalist system? There's no way to tackle it except for a complete overthrow of the enablers of the capitalist system. Now, the 7 non-negotiable pillars, they seek to overthrow the neoliberal policies and bring about the policies that will accommodate everyone and the policies that will ensure that there is contribution by the people, there's accountability by government, it's open system. There should not be any victimization of anyone in the process. And the founding manifesto further sees this as the current political system is designed to exclude the people from participating in decision making. South Africa's electoral systems are controlled by money, secrecy, and power. All political parties refuse to disclose their financial backers. Despite the millions they get from Parliament, it is a crying shame that in the 21st century, we are presided over by an elite system of power where only 400 members of the National Assembly govern over 50 million people. The EFF shall agitate for the transfer of power to the people and make democracy real for the majority. Now, we need a concerted effort to stop the unelected multinationals from having the power to control the direction of government, which otherwise we call it neo-patrimonialism. The current government's openness is always subjected to civil society forces and forcing it to open up. You'd remember how the TAC forced the government to open up about the ARVs. You'd now remember how the Amadiba Crisis Committee forced the government to open up about the Xolobeni mines. You'd remember how in the rural areas, in particular the Eastern Cape, how equal education had to force the government to disclose the horrible standards that the schools are in. It had to take the description of a school to court for a court to determine what is a school that meets the norms and standards. It had to take organizations, political organizations like the Economic Freedom Fighters, for people to understand that what corruption is and how should be removed from our society through parliament. It had to take the EFF for people to understand that political parties should not be serving a certain group, but should be serving people of the country. People today understand that they can take any issue to the EFF, whether it's a labor-related issue, a gender-related issue, health issue, you can't access education. These are the matters that the EFF had taken up, found resolutions without taking arms, but through the radical voice. So the current government is not a suitable state to carry the mandate of the six cardinal pillars that were deliberated on. And the seventh cardinal pillar seeks to ensure that the environment in which these cardinal pillars are going to be delivered is conducive enough for everyone to be taking part, and everyone should be brought on board. Now, we have media that should be also playing a role in opening up governments, in holding governments to account. But it's an unfortunate fact that media houses have lost their integrity. A few that still have their integrity intact, they try, they inform society of what's happening, they help the society to understand. But also the way in which media communicates is always biased. And it's not in simple terms where people will understand what is happening. The terms that are always used to communicate to people so that they can understand the status of each government are not always user-friendly for a layman to understand. So media should be one of the structures that we use to open up government. But it's very unfortunate that we cannot today say in this current state we can use it. Now, what does the EFF seek to achieve by this pillar? It says open government. What is an open government? An open government is a government that allows the public to see inside, to contribute into projects of the government, to contribute into policies, to have evaluations that are open. Let's take, for instance, the IDP. The IDP is a program that seeks to get the communities to be part of the decisions for their service delivery. But how these IDP processes are rolled out into communities are not fair. So the EFF says a ward that has 10 communities or villages or townships cannot have one session of consultation for the IDP, because you are talking to 10 communities, a ward that is in a geographical spread of more than 100 kilometers, and you expect all these people to converge at a point, people who have no access to transport, people who live on social grants. You ought to take the consultation process to them so that they give you their ideas, they make their own priorities, you bring your budget, they talk to it, they determine their priorities and give you the mandate to go and implement. That's the openness we're looking for. And the budget of the state should be transparent. The transparency of the budget is for everyone to not doubt that. If I was looking for a tap in my household and the budget can only give us 2 taps on the street, and then in the following year add 2 taps, the other year add 2 taps, people will not know if your budget is operated in secret. People ought to know how much do you have for them, and that should not be kept a secret. The legislative arm cannot draft policies without consulting the people. The consultation should not be superficial as it is currently. The consultation cannot be conducted in one town of a province, but it affects everyone. It should be a consultation process that reaches the people, for the people to make a decision and for the people to welcome the outcome. The judiciary should be open. There shouldn't be any proceedings of the court that are held in secret. There shouldn't be any sealing of documents by the judiciary. Information that must be known by the people must come to the people. There shouldn't be inconsistency in rulings. When a court rules that recommendations of a public protector are legally binding, that consistency should apply to everything that has anything to do with a recommendation. It shouldn't look into the face of a person. It shouldn't look at who is coming. It shouldn't drive a social divide between the rich and the poor. The court process, if it starts at 8, it should start at 8 in the remote area of Tsofimfaba, in the remote area of Ekunu. It should start in Soweto the same way it starts in Johannesburg. The executive, when it takes the decisions through the democratic processes, they should always be cautious and have a distinction between what the majority says and what the rule of law says. It shouldn't be opposition that are taking a government to court to fight for the principle. The rule of law should always be regarded as the way that everything should go through. You can't bend the law by using majority. So the executive and the legislative arm should understand that. That's the government and the openness we're looking for. There should be free access to information. There shouldn't be an information in government that's closed. And then accountability. What is accountability? Accountability in governance is when you come and account on the priorities that the people have given you. So if community A has prioritized water to the schools, to the clinics, to every household, according to the budget which you have provided, the accountability shouldn't be difficult. If there was R1 million allocated to the project, there should be a very easy way of you accounting for that R1 million as a government. So when you table your financials as a department or as an entity of government, and the Auditor General comes in to audit you as a state because you are utilizing the public funds and the taxpayers' money, there should not be fruitless and wasteful expenditure, irregular expenditure, unauthorized expenditure, which is not known by the people. So that kind of accountability, when the Auditor General tells you as a state that you have irregularly spent money, and you say, no, the school was built, water was taken into the school. This irregularity occurred out of the bursting of a pipe. We had to write the necessary documentation, but the kids at the school had to drink water. So we had to come in, and the community can back us on this. That's the irregularity that should come about. But it can't be an irregularity that the pipe has burst, and therefore we took that pipe and the whole infrastructure of that area, we had to dig it out. It's no longer an irregularity. It's something else. The moment you reach out to something that you were not supposed to be tackling or attending to, you are now venturing into a space where you have to account properly. It's no longer what we will call an emergency. So this accountability should also come physical, in a manner in which, if you were asked to build the water infrastructure, bring water to the people, people should be seeing the tap that gets water out of it. There should be water outside out of the tap. There shouldn't be a tap but no water. That's the accountability. There must be an explanation as to why there's a tap but there's no water. Why there's a school but there are no desks. Why there are kids in class but there are no books. Why there's a clinic but there are no nurses. There must be an explanation, and there shouldn't be a situation of that nature. Because when you plan, you are planning with the people. When you plan a clinic for this community, you know the population. You know the ratio of nurses you require for such population. You know the square meters of a clinic you have to build for that population. You know the quantity of medicine that must be procured for that population. So that's the government the EFF is talking about. That's the accountability on implementing the projects of the EFF we are looking for. Now, when things are not happening, Chapter 9 institutions have to come in And when the Chapter 9 institutions are coming in and make recommendations, those recommendations must be respected. They must be binding. The problems must be corrected. There shouldn't be a government that takes everything of Chapter 9 on review because it has to protect politicians, it has to protect leaders. We don't want that government. We want a government that when it's corrected by a Chapter 9 institution, when it's corrected by the Constitutional Court, it complies, it implements the rulings, and it operates in a normal situation. Now, the accountability of government and state agencies should be clear. When people are petitioning the state, they should be responded to. When a police officer turns you away from the police station that you cannot open a case because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there should be accountability by the SAPS. That is why today we sit with high levels of gender-based violence that's unreported. Cases go to court sometimes, and the prosecution is not successful because the state agencies do not do what they have to do. They must account. The government we're looking for is a government that's going to respect the right of every individual. A government that's going to understand that the moment you walk into a police station, you must be attended to. A government that understands that when you walk into the court and they're looking for a protection order, it must be granted to you. A government that understands that as a social development, the moment the police station refers a vulnerable woman with the children who is saving her life and that of her kids from a monster they are running away from home, should provide shelter with no questions. A government that must empower that woman so that she can go out and stand on her own. So we're looking for a government that's not going to kill minors under the ground. That must account for every mine and every miner that goes down to dig the mineral. Account on safety measures. A government that must account on a patient who goes into hospital because they are sick. They get diagnosed with HIV, and then they get sterilized without their consent. A government that the EFF is looking for is a government that's going to fire that doctor, a government that's going to take the pension of that doctor and compensate the victim, a government that's going to send out a clear message that if a person comes in with a cough, treat the cough, examine the patient, tell the patient what's wrong with them. The patient must have a choice of what must happen to them. When you say as a doctor, I'm going to administer on you a local anesthetic, a patient must be aware of what would be the side effects after waking up. So that's what accountability means. It's not only accounting on how much you've spent, it's accounting on services that the people must receive. Then what is a corrupt-free government? This one is a very clear element of government and an element that we have to rid ourselves of. Now, corruption emanates from lack of accountability, lack of openness, lack of respect. So corruption is clear. Is when a person does not do what they are employed or elected to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have taken money. You are corrupt as a member of parliament the moment the member of society gives you an issue. You don't table the issue. You look into the minister whom you were supposed to be consulting pertaining the issue and tell them, you know what, by the way, that community is giving me problems, that the clinic is always closed. You are corrupt. When you meet the Minister of Health with the issue you were given by a community because the clinic is always closed, is for you to be clear. Use the legislative arms and the processes available to you to pursue the matter. And you should not be apologetic. There shouldn't be a fear in doing that. You are corrupt. The moment when you sit in a panel, you look at the candidates, you see a friend, you appoint a friend who does not meet the requirements. And you then convince your former panelists that, no, this one, because I went to school with him or her, let's take her. So there are various ways and means of corruption. We can go through them the whole day. But there are simply corrupt elements that sometimes we think it's normal for them to happen. If you practice nepotism, you are corrupt. If you get yourself involved in business and you trade with the same state you are working for, you are corrupt. If you sell the jobs, you are corrupt. If you're demanding favors from people because you have to give them a service, you are corrupt. And that's what the EFF doesn't want in the system of government. We want a corrupt-free government. And it can only start from being open and an account. Then there's no room for corruption. The moment you embezzle the funds, you are corrupt. So there's also a corrupt free society that we must have. What is a corrupt free society? A corrupt free society is a society that is conscientized. A society that understands that the moment I see an advert on paper and an official of government tells me I must pay them 5,000 for my child to be employed, that's corruption. And as a society, as a member of society, you must not engage in such a transaction, because that's how we're going to have a corrupt free society. Let's not get engaged in transactions where we are going to get services and pay some drink. Buy a drink for me, I'll give you this. No, don't worry, we'll come and fix your taps, but you have to buy us something. That's not supposed to happen. The election of ward committees should be a society and a community project. The moment you keep information and do not tell the rest of the community that this has to take place, it means you are corrupt as a society. Everyone has to be taken on board. The moment a school has to appoint an SGB, everyone in the community must know about that. So there shouldn't be a fear of victimization by state agencies. How do you know you are being victimized as a member of society? You must know that you are being victimized by being turned away from the police station. You can't be turned away from a police station without a proper explanation and a clear guidance on how you have to deal with the matter. The moment you get sterilized because you are HIV positive, as if there is no other way of you living, the moment you do not get school as a parent, the moment you are denied access to education because you cannot afford, the moment you get arrested because you have killed a rapist you found on top of your child, and you had in self-defense, you had to remove the person by force. The moment you fight off a monster called your husband or a boyfriend and kill them simply because they wanted to kill you first. The moment you get abused in custody because you killed a monster, that's victimization. And it should not be left unattended. It should be reported and make the officials in charge, make them aware of the situation and attend to it. So the EFF in curbing corruption has come up with a whole range of solutions. These solutions, most of them, are in our 2019 elections manifesto and the founding manifesto. Amongst these solutions is that we are not going to have any private companies. We're going to capacitate the state, because the moment you have private companies, there's a room for corruption. The moment you use consultants as if the skill is not available in a country and within your workforce, that's a room for corruption. The moment you don't build internal capacity of a state and want to outsource services to the people, there's a room for corruption. So these are the things that the EFF is going to make sure they don't happen. Most importantly, there should be a very strict and a sentencing which is going to send a message to corrupt people that you should not spend less than 20 years of sentence in jail for corruption. Because when you are corrupt, when you take R1 million out of a budget of a ward, you have not only removed that R1 million, but you have also robbed a person from clean water, from accessing clean water. You have robbed a person from having a proper road in order to access the hospital, to access the school. So that corruption should not be taken lightly. That's why the EFF says you should not spend less than 20 years in jail for corruption. We should have courts that deal only with corruption matters so that they are dealt with speedily. Officials and employees of government should lose their pensions for being corrupt. They should be blacklisted from being re-employed by the state. And we should have a police service that acts promptly for everyone. We must capacitate our police. We must make sure they have enough fleet suitable to drive in our remote rural areas. There shouldn't be a turnaround time of a police van simply because a town is 100 kilometers away, that a police van will take 24 hours to reach you. There shouldn't be a state under the EFF government where the ambulance takes more than 2 hours to get to the person. There shouldn't be under the EFF government where the police station is not in each and every ward. The nurses are not in each and every ward. The social workers are not in each and every ward. The schools are not over 5 kilometers away from each community. So that's the system we're looking for. A system that's going to be working with the people. A system that's going to capacitate the Chapter 9s because they help to police the government, correct them, and guide them every time they step outside the rule of law. And in the EFF government, we should protect the right for people to protest. Because we cannot do perhaps things the same way people want, they should protest to voice their dissatisfaction. They should be heard. They should petition. And we must hear the people, help them, reach out to the people. The courts of sexual offenses should be increased. Perpetrators, especially of sexual-related crimes, should be locked away. There shouldn't be a bail for them. There shouldn't be a parole for them. People who have proven over and over in the society that they cannot live amongst the people should be kept away from the society we seek to build. We will have a state security institution that has the minimum security standards that vets every employer in South Africa and every employee that comes to government, ensures that they have never been found in the wrong side of the law, as it was the case with the post office employee who was found to have been a convict of a serious and violent crime, but somehow skipped the system and found employment in the post office, where he raped because he has proven that he cannot live amongst the people. The system did not vet the person properly, and the person repeated and whatever he had started and showed us the true colors of who he was by raping a girl. So we shouldn't have a state that does not vet employees. We shouldn't have a state that employs people who have been found to be corrupt. Commissars, fighters, South Africans, we need to all work towards a true democratic state which have open, accountable, corrupt-free government and society. We shouldn't have a fear of being victimized by the state agents. We shouldn't have courts that are used to purge and destroy political opponents. We shouldn't have societies where we eliminate each other simply because of positions. We shouldn't have society where we eliminate each other because of the lists to parliament. We should be a society that's patient, that teaches each other, the each one teach one method should be adopted by our communities. In every corner of the world where EFF exists, in every corner of South Africa, out of all the wards in South Africa, I urge you fighters to always advocate for open government, conscientize the society on accountability, conscientize society every time you see corruption. You shouldn't fear to point it out. By that, I'm finalizing and closing the lecture on 7 non-negotiable pillars of the EFF. We now live in the difficult time where the invisible monster called Corona is out there attacking us one by one. Let's fight this together. Let's stay at home, away from Corona. Essential service workers must at all times observe safety and practice all the regulations. Let's all observe and practice the regulations in order to be safe from this COVID-19. Let's wash our hands regularly, sanitize, keep our immune system boosted, and we shall all conquer. Thank you.